Hello everybody, it's CVH here, and today I'll be talking about some underrated cards from the recent Heroes of Skyrim expansion in Elder Scrolls Legends. We've only had the expansion to play with for a little over a week now, but I figured it would be a good time to just highlight a couple cards that have really stood out, that didn't stand out to me when I was first doing my first impressions videos, and when the community basically saw the cards for the first time. I was definitely guilty of underrating a few of these, and I think many other people were as well. So if you're new to the game, if you're just now discovered it, if you've taken a break and you haven't played much post Heroes of Skyrim, what I hope to do with this is shine some light on some cards that have either been underappreciated for the first couple days of the expansion, or maybe still are now and have more potential to be realized that you could experiment with and hopefully have some good results with. So I've just selected 5 cards that I'll be going into in this video in no particular order, just the order they show up on the screen. That you should definitely consider if you're playing in the post-Heroes of Skyrim meta for the first time. And the first of those cards is Shieldbreaker. And by the way, I will be doing more videos on the Heroes of Skyrim set in general in the coming days on the YouTube channel. I want to get a top 10 video out there eventually. I want to do a legendary crafting guide and an epic crafting guide just for the set, so stay tuned for those as well. But the first underrated card that we'll be talking about today is Shieldbreaker. 2-cost item in strength, +2/+2, and summon an enemy creature loses guard. Very simple card, very aggressive card. At worst, it's an overcosted Steel Scimitar, because Steel Scimitar gives you +2/+2 on a creature, but it only costs 1. So is Shieldbreaker worth it at a 2 cost? Now that's really the question. But you're also causing an enemy creature to lose guard. That effectively functions the way you want Silence to function if you're an aggro deck. A lot of people play Earthbone Spinner and Shadowfen Priest in these aggressive decks, but you're really only using them to bypass guards, so we often see them taken out for cards like Cast Out that simply do that at cheaper cost. And Shieldbreaker is cheaper than all the cards I just mentioned. Unlike Bonebow, which is a 2-cost item that silences a creature, you don't have the flexibility of silencing anything, but you also have +2/+2 of stats, which is very good considering Bonebow is only a +1/+0. So the reason I like this card so much, and the reason it's starting to see a bit more play now, is because you're killing those 2 birds with 1 stone. You're getting the silence effect on a guard, and you're getting that extra damage, which can be the difference when you're pressuring your opponent. You have a creature or 2 out there, they block you with a guard. Now, you can just power up one of your guys and attack over it with something like a Steel Scimitar. You can just play your Silence card, silence the guard, and continue going for the face. But Shieldbreaker allows you to get that extra damage on the board, so you're not really missing developing the board, and effectively silencing the guard, all with 1 card. And then you get to choose where you put that extra damage on your board, and whether or not that goes to the face or trades with something else. That's up to you. And what that means is that this card also, unlike the more narrow cards we've been mentioning, is good in the either-or situations as well. Sometimes you just need that bit of extra damage to push for lethal. You have 2 on board and they're at 4. Shieldbreaker gets the job done. Sometimes you already have way more than enough damage, but there's a giant Nahagleave or some other combination of guards in your way. Shieldbreaker, even though you might not need the extra damage in the +2/+2 buff, it'll get the job done getting those guards out of the way. So it's good in those situations, even though it's not quite as cheap as maybe an Intimidate or a Steel Scimitar. It probably won't matter at that point, and just the fact that you can get both of those effects at the same time when you need to make this a real contender for aggro decks. So if you're experimenting with those kind of decks, I definitely encourage you to try out a couple copies of Shieldbreaker. You'll probably be surprised at how good they are. The next card I'll be talking about should be familiar to you if you've been staying up to date with my videos recently, and that is Master Swordsmith, a card that I've used to a pretty good extent in Item Assassin and Item Sorcerer lists on stream. 3 cost 2/3 at the start of your turn, give each item in your deck +1/+1. Kind of an unassuming card at first glance. It's easy to take a look at a 3 cost 2/3 and say, well, does it have to live for a turn to get any benefit? Okay, it's probably not that good, and is the benefit even that important? It doesn't look like that insane of a card, but in the context of these item decks, this card has definitely surpassed my wildest imaginations of its power level. The fact of the matter is, there are times when your opponent simply can't answer 3 cost 2/3. I've also had the benefit of people not really expecting this card to be too powerful if they let it live for a turn or 2, and I think they've come to regret that at the end of the game when the Mace of Encumbrances are 5/4s and Tomes are 6/6s and stuff like that. But I do think this card breathes some serious new life in those Item Assassin and Item Sorcerer decks, and in combination somewhat with Arcane Enchanter, which is giving those random keywords as well. So if you want to see this card's true power level, be sure to check out maybe some past broadcasts on my Twitch channel of Item Sorcerer, or the very similar Item Assassin deck I did a couple videos on here. Things get out of hand. I think The decks are very powerful, yet maybe not totally refined yet, but I do think Master Swordsmith is a pretty critical component now. That's really one of the things pushing me to want to play some more item-centric decks. And those decks are a ton of fun, and Master Swordsmith's power level, if the game is going to last a few more turns at all in those decks with a ton of items, is really, really high. So definitely check out Master Swordsmith for those types of decks, and you'll probably be surprised yet again. I'll be staying in blue for the next card. The next underrated card in the set is Bringer of Nightmares. I hesitate to call this one really underrated now because now people are starting to really realize its power level, but at the start it was kind of overshadowed by a couple of the other cards we'll be talking about in a bit. But Bringer of Nightmares, 6 cost 4/4, summon, see a vision of a random creature, then you must choose a creature to transform into it. So yeah, a very, very heavy RNG effect here. What they've essentially done on a 6 cost 4/4 body is make a playable Wabajack that you can essentially play 3 of while fixing why it was unplayable in the first place. First, Wabajack doesn't have a body and it costs 5, so that's kind of disappointing by itself. Bringer of Nightmares doesn't have the body you'd expect on a 6 cost, but it does impact the board immediately, and it is getting some stats on the board. And then you get to see the vision of a random creature before you choose the target that you're going to be transforming into, or before you choose what you're transforming into that creature. So what it's doing is it's taking the Wabajack effect and giving you more control over how it goes for you, while maintaining the incredibly wide scope of the Wabajack RNG. There could be debates on whether or not this is a healthy thing to implement in the game, but I do think the jury is kind of settled now on whether or not this card is actually good. I think people are realizing this card is quite good in many decks. I've seen it played in anything from mid-range Sorcerer to Control Mage to Merrick Battle Mage, which is really sweet because you get to transform those Nord Firebrand tokens off Markarth Bannerman and Raiding Party. And there are many uses for this card. Since you actually have the control over what you're transforming, unlike Wabajack, that allows you to start thinking about when you want to play the Bringer to try to get the maximum value, because you really don't have control at all over the random creature you get to see a vision of. So what you're ideally trying to do is play this on a board that has something threatening on your opponent's side, either just a giant creature like an 8/8, or something with a relevant last gasp effect, maybe like Eclipse Baroness or something, because you've transformed that away, they're not going to get the last gasp effect, and simultaneously a board state in which you have something not great, maybe a Ward Crafter that lost its ward, a Shrieking Harpy that already shackled something. Worst case scenario, you're going to have these 4/4 Bringer of Nightmares itself on the board. So if you're playing this on a clean board on your side against your opponent's Alduin, either you get something insane like your own Alduin to blow up theirs, or you get some Enraged Mudcrab or anything that's less than an Alduin, basically, that you can transform their Alduin into. At that point, basically anything is going to be good. So you're looking for those situations where if you get something bad, your opponent's about to get something bad, and if you get something good, it'll really benefit you. It's still an unpredictable effect. It's not always going to be good. It's always not going to be terrible because you do get some control over it, but that said, sometimes you just don't get the right thing for the situation. If you're getting pressured heavily and you're relying on Bringer of Nightmares to soak up that pressure by rolling an Odahvinger, a Manticora, or a Shackle effect, yeah, it's going to be disappointing sometimes. However, the fact that it can just sort of lame out those games and high roll an Odahvinger, just a complete reset button, it has some similarities to some Hail Mary Yogg-Saron's I've cast in my time in Hearthstone a long time ago. If you have seen the Infinite Alduin video on this channel, you'll know all hope was lost. There were maybe 2 or 3 cards in the game that I could have rolled off Bringer to save me, and I rolled one. So that is definitely the crazy less than 1% chance of that insane of a Bringer of Nightmares. But overall, the value of this card is surprisingly high. On the surface, it looks much more unpredictable than you can make it through smart playing. And smart deck building too. Like I said, the Nord Firebrand tokens are really good with that card. So we'll be moving on to the next underrated card, number 4, which is going to be Cauldron Keeper. A very interesting card. I think I glossed over it way too much when I was initially doing my set review. So I'm just going to turn my phone off. I just realized I got a text. 5 cost, 3/5 guard. So it's a guard. That's fine. Summon, give your activated supports an extra use. You may activate your supports an extra time each turn. Not the most durable card, clearly pretty defensive. That said, I've mentioned numerous times that turn 5 is traditionally not the strongest for many of these control decks. If Control Mage doesn't have an Iron in hand or a Piercing Javelin target, for example, it's likely going to float some Magicka or just pass, not doing a whole lot. So getting another defensive option is good. And I did gloss over this because historically in Legends, the support cards especially the activated support cards, just haven't been too good. So in order to judge this, we have to bring up the supports themselves. And I'd like to discuss the supports in this set, because what this card has done, in combination with a couple of the other seemingly weak supports, is sort of created a new style of control mage deck that I have seen Blackfall and Turquoise Link both playing. You know, both high-level players, both said this deck has been pretty good for them. So this is a card that I expect to keep people interested in the support archetype as a control strategy, and I think this is a deck that could get substantially better. We have Elixir of Vitality, which is a reasonable healing option. 2 health over the course of, or 6 health over the course of 3 turns of the 2 health. All of a sudden that turns into 8 health if you can jam a Cauldron Keeper on the board while you have Vitality, and each turn you can activate this an extra time. And then in combination with a card like Tower Alchemist, which gives your supports infinite uses if that card is allowed to stick, basically infinite health gain, Wolf Cage, summoning those uncaged wolves which get +1/+1 for each other friendly wolf. These decks that I've seen, the Control Mage with all the supports, typically run a couple copies of Wolf Cage just for that insane board flooding value turn after turn after turn. If the game's gone late, you could grind them out with wolves and just take over the game that way. And we also have gotten one of the other new cards which has been seen in that deck, and no other decks to my knowledge, College of Winterhold. Looking at 3 random 1-cost actions and choose one to draw, then increase the cost of cards this reveals by 1. Again, getting this up to 4 uses, all of a sudden you're getting those 4-cost actions. If you can play a couple of the Cauldron Keepers, then you'll be looking at Piercing Javelins and things like that. Infinite uses out of the Tower Alchemist, again, that's pretty crazy. So yeah, this is a really powerful card, making those otherwise inconspicuous supports on the map. You're getting those into an actual deck that can take advantage of them, and the deck's power level has been proven to be pretty high so far, and we already have some reasonable enough supports from the core set like Goldbrand, and I haven't really seen Orb of Vermina or Wabbajack in those, but again, a card that works pretty well with those types of cards. So yeah, Cauldron Keeper has totally taken me by surprise. I wouldn't have expected a support style deck to actually be good, but in a control mage shell with all those good staples like Lightning Bolt and Ice Storm already, it's proven to be very powerful. So definitely a deck to look out for. I think of all the cards we're mentioning in this video, this is the one whose potential is really yet to be realized. But I expect that to change, and I expect it to be pretty solid. The last card we're going to be talking about in this underrated video, if you've been keeping up to date with what people are playing, it's not going to be underrated for you anymore, but I need to mention this because I did underrate the crap out of this card when I was doing my first impressions videos, and I feel like a couple other people did as well, because the hype leading up to this set, what everyone was talking about was Echo of Akatosh. And people have jammed 3 copies of this and 3 copies of Praetorian Commander in control decks with a lot of prophecies, and even some other decks in the Commander's case particularly, and Commander has really surprised everyone. Everyone was hyped on Akatosh, excuse me, and a bunch of other cards in the set, and Praetorian Commander really took everyone by surprise. As soon as 2 days after the expansion hit, though, I would say that Praetorian Commander really made itself known as a powerhouse in a lot of these decks. But for those of you who may not have played since the expansion release and you're wondering what cards I might have underrated that became very popular very quickly, Commander is definitely the most popular. In fact, if I were to ask basically anyone in the game, if they could nerf one card in the set, I'm pretty sure they'd either say Echo of Akatosh or Praetorian Commander. And I think it's kind of decided at this point that Commander is the higher power level card, even though its effect isn't quite as upsetting as losing to random keywords. The fact that you're buffing your entire deck, that's equipping a Steel Scimitar of stats to every creature in your deck. That is double Divine Fervor to every creature in your deck. The only thing this card doesn't do is really develop your board too much by itself. So on the surface it looks like a card that's really weak to aggro. So maybe you try to play aggro against those decks, but they're jamming 25 to 35 prophecy cards, so it's probably not going to go too well. Obviously this card isn't always amazing. In a much more aggressive style of deck, when you're trying to close the game out by turns 7 through 9, you're not going to be getting too much buff out of this card or cards like Echo of Akatosh, so it's probably not ideal if you're trying to close the game early, but in a deck that is creature focused and aiming for the long game, and immediately we're all again thinking of that Prophecy Control Mage, which is going for the long game and has a bunch of creatures. Praetorian Commander has been a huge powerhouse, very insane card. I've seen 9/8, 8/8, 7 Ward Crafters, or just huge creatures. And you can use this card with other cards that duplicate its summoning ability, which make these things so huge. A couple examples of this are Dark Rebirth, very popular in a lot of these control mage lists now. Sacrifices a creature to summon a copy of it. Also works with cards like Manticore and your healing options. And of course, pretty cute with last gasp effects as well in other decks. And the other very popular thing people have been using is Winterhold Illusionist. Another creature disappears, then returns at the end of the turn. Again, that's going to mean you buff your entire deck by +2/+2 yet again if you're using it on a Praetorian commander. So decks, I've seen varying levels of how much you commit to the commander and the duplicating of this effect. I've personally played it with 3 commanders, 3 echoes, a bunch of prophecies, removal, common control cards, and a couple dark rebirths, and that's been pretty powerful for me. I've seen this also see play, unlike Echo, in more mid-rangey decks like mid-range mage to some degree, even though those games are going to be shorter on average than the Prophecy Control Mage deck. It's one of the least fun decks to play against, according to basically anyone. It's not necessarily the most interesting experience. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the most powerful mage deck. I've still enjoyed the traditional Control Mage deck a lot, and we're just now getting this support style of deck that I mentioned as well. So a lot of different options out there for those styles of decks, but Commander has definitely seen way more popularity than I think many people anticipated. So if you're looking for a fun card to experiment with that may not be super fun for your opponent if the game goes that long, Praetorian Commander is up there. But these are 5 cards that I think many people overlooked, including myself to varying degrees. And I'm really excited to see all of them seeing play. I think there's still much more room to experiment with each and every one of them, and the deck lists, again, are still being refined. We're only a little bit over a week into the expansion's metagame, and I'm excited to see what other cards come to light as things we haven't really tried, but are very powerful. So as always, if you've enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like and leave a comment and let me know which cards you're excited to try from the Heroes of Skyrim expansion, or which you think are still underrated that I didn't mention. Stay subscribed to the channel for more Legends videos. You can follow my stream in the description to catch me live, and I'll see you guys next time.